When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
Everybody and their brother sent me this clip over the weekend. Or, well, actually within, I guess, the last 24 hours. Messages, Instagram, Facebook. I mean, I think if you guys thought I would see it in smoke signals, you sent it too. I saw it. I did see it. And I thought that was a weird remark. She says, the United States, we've got to reduce the population to fight climate. Do you realize that that's a whole gaffe? Or not a gaffe, but that's a lie? So here's one of the things that always has thrown me when I look back upon my life. So when I was in college, the most valuable class that I ever took in college was logic. Everything else was trash, garbage, absolute flaming turd. It was horrible. All the other classes were stupid. I literally had a class about women in Renaissance France that was a part of a women's studies because it's such a racket and you have to take these stupid electives. And I was miserable the entire time. Anyway, I took 2 years of logic, because I took the first class. It's like math with words. And I so enjoyed it, even though the professor was weird, I kept taking it. And the professor was this crunchy dude. He wore a corduroy even in the summer. Who does that? Who wears corduroy in the summer? He wore corduroy in the summer. He drove a Volvo. It was Pooh Brown, a Volvo. So, I mean, he's checking off every box possible, right? This is sort of the quintessential St. Louis progressive, right? Birkenstocks, check. Corduroy, check. Driving the Volvo, all the check. Had a, not a canoe, what am I thinking of? Kayak. Had a kayak on top of his Volvo almost all the time. Even when it was cold outside. Do people do that in the cold? I don't know. Had the kayak all the time. Literally, I'm not even kidding, hands to sky. Had a bumper sticker on said Volvo that was expertly placed, by the way. I'm pretty sure he used a leveler. That said, I'd rather be kayaking. I'm not kidding you. Where did he kayak in St. Louis? Was he like on the Merrimack? Did he go down the Hoozle? Like, where'd he go? I don't know. Like, where do you kayak? But, I mean, there's a lot of rivers, but I digress. Anyway. And he was the guy, my first semester with him when I was a freshman. It was a class that was teaching ethics, and I'll be damned, he was teaching Peter Singer. Peter Singer is an abortion of intellectual thought. In case you were wondering, that's the best way to describe it. If you see your kids come home with a book and it's anything Peter Singer, it's trash. You better be, that class is sus. So anyway, at first I didn't like him, and I thought, oh my gosh, this nut-eating, tofu, hemp-weaving, fruitcake, I just can't even deal. He was a very soft-spoken man. He wore wire rim glasses. He had a very short haircut for a hippie, but he was one of those neat hippies, like a Frank Lloyd Wright hippie, Anyway, so the first semester passed without event, and it was, you had to say the right things in the class, and it was just really weird to learn Peter Singer, who just had no regard for human life or humanity. But then it got interesting when I had him for logic. Because I had him for 2 classes, ethics and logic. And the logic was fascinating. And pretty much, so a lot of what I do now was based on that class that I learned. I mean, at least it helped me acquire the rudimentary skills to break apart stupid arguments. And it was such a valuable class that I just kept taking the next level and the next level until I took all of them. And even though he was a super far lefty, he did appreciate logic to the point where he prided himself on being logical, even if it undercut his personal ideology. So his vanity was greater than his obsession with ideology, which I thought was interesting. So long story short, I have this teacher. And a lot of the stuff that I recognize now in politics is from that class. The only valuable class ever. It should be a required course. I don't even ever know what happened to him. He'd probably be appalled learning what I've become, because a lot of people think that being a conservative commentator is worse than being a meth-dealing prostitute, but I digress. So this comment from Kamala Harris, she's calling on the U.S. to reduce population. This was one of the things that he had touched on in ethics, and he actually gave us. It was the world hunger myth, and it touched upon this myth that's been perpetuated for the past, 30, 40 years about overpopulation. There isn't actually an overpopulation on planet Earth. In fact, there has been a decrease in population. And so that book and several others, subsequently that I read, gets into some of the stereotypical things that you think of overpopulation, the themes of overpopulation, and it destroys them. Case in point. They went and they looked, in one of the books that I read, they looked at population nation by nation. So what's one of the things that you always hear about? Like with Italy. What's a common stereotype with Italy? Big Italian families, right? Big Italian families, they get together every Sunday, they have their meal after church. But that's slowly fading away. Not that they don't get together on Sundays, which they do, but the big aspect of the big Italian family, that's changing because people are having fewer children to the point where they can't even keep up with the current population level. Like in Japan, it's incredibly bad. They're going to have a huge population of older people, but yet not enough younger people to sustain it in the economic system. The United States is barely keeping status quo. But in a lot of these other nations, particularly a number of European nations, it is woefully under the rate required to maintain population. But there were some interesting things. There's been several books written in the past 20 years that looks at, countries like Pakistan or countries like India that actually do not only meet the requirements to maintain status quo, but they exceed them. But this idea that there's overpopulation is a lie. It is an absolute lie. Look at the birth rate of every nation. It's a lie. They're lying to you. You know why they're lying to you? Because they think that you're either too busy, you're too wrapped up in trying to make ends meet because you have to pay Joe Biden's taxes. He wants you to pay for everyone else's grad school, college tuition. So you got to keep up with that. But then, at the same time too, while they're lying to you, they know that you're too busy. They also simultaneously think you're too stupid to follow along with this. I mean, that's the whole purpose of, how they approach government. They want it to be too big so you can't follow everything. So she says this, GAFFE, we got to reduce the population. She says she meant to say reduce pollution. But what have you heard, hand in hand, about pollution and climate change? Population, have you not? Is that not something that you have heard frequently? So that's why I think this is totally sus and I don't believe her. Do you believe her? It's not, dude, she meant it. I think she meant it hand in hand. She was at Coppin State University in Baltimore. She's talking about building a clean energy economy. Now, the official White House transcript acknowledges and corrects her error, but they said that in the transcript, population is crossed out and pollution is added in brackets to denote what she intended to say. Do you believe this? Because if you do, let me tell you about a fantastic piece of real estate that you can get in on the ground level. It's a bridge that I've recently come into possession of. Very famous bridge. You might have heard of it. The Brooklyn Bridge, right? It's that famed bridge. I own it and I will sell it to you. Right? I mean, I'm all about being generous. I want everyone to have a piece of American, iconography. I got that to sell to you. But that's what this, I honestly think a lot of the climate change is reducing the population.